In Psalms 119, verse 160, it says, all your words are true. All your righteous laws are eternal. As you flex and extend your wrists, remember Jesus holds you firmly in his grasp. Just as your wrists move in flexibility, his eternal word brings stability to your faith. Trust in his unchanging promises and rest in his steadfast love. In Christ, you are secure, supported, and strengthened for every movement of life. I'm Roman Hunter. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the wrist extension and flexion exercise. Okay? Now, this exercise is primarily important for persons who have, it can affect your grip, your grasp, but for persons who have a weak wrist flexion or weak wrist extension, especially for persons who have had previous injuries to the wrist. All right, so if you have had a wrist sprain, if you have had a fracture that is near the wrist joint that would have affected the range of motion, the flexibility, the mobility of the wrist, this exercise really helps to increase the overall functionality of the wrist. It helps to strengthen the muscles around the wrist area, thus providing more support and stability for the wrist. All right, so the primary movers of this exercise for wrist flexion, this position, wrist flexion, the wrist flexors here of the forearm, and for wrist extension, the wrist extensors here of the forearm. Okay, these muscles right here. All right, so the starting position of this exercise, and anybody can do this exercise for all ages, anyone can do it. If you really want to isolate the muscles of the forearm and you want to work the muscles of the forearm, this is a good exercise that you can use. But generally speaking, when you perform your regular exercises in your routine and you're doing a lot of gripping and you're gripping strong, you have a strong grip, that also helps to develop the muscles of the forearm indirectly, okay? Because the same muscles are being worked for the most part. All right, so the starting position of this exercise, you can use a table. So your hand can be resting on a table for wrist extension, but it's just that when you're doing flexion, it's kind of difficult. So let's say that your hand is resting on a table like this, and you can perform wrist extension in that position. But when it's time for you to turn the hand over, because of the position of the shoulder, it's a bit difficult. Your hand will more than likely stop in neutral. So ideally, what we'd want it to be is the elbow tucked in a bit, so you can perform proper pronation and proper supination and pronation of the forearm in order to perform the correct wrist extension and flexion. All right, so if it is that you don't have a table or a bed or a surface or raised surface to rest the forearm on, that is totally fine. Just make sure that you're seated and your hips are about 90 degrees, knees flex 90 degrees, feet flat on the floor. Have your forearm resting on your thigh and perform the exercise. As simple as that, right? If it is that you want some more resistance, you can use a weighted object, you can use a bottle of water. Wherever you are, it doesn't really matter whether you're at the gym or in the park, at home, it doesn't really matter where you are, it can be done anywhere. Just get a weighted object, a stone, you can get a bottle of water, you can get a stick or something. You can use a dumbbell if you have dumbbells at home, or a kettlebell. Right here I have a dumbbell, and what I'm doing, you can even emphasize keeping the grip open a little bit, and then as you bring it in, curl in the weight and end in flexion. All right, so I'm releasing, curl in, and flex. I'm releasing, curl in, and flex. The reason why I'm releasing is that these same muscles here that passes the wrist also go into the fingers. All right, so when I allow my fingers to open a little bit, it puts a little bit of a stretch on those muscles, and as I curl in, I'm already getting a contraction of those muscles of the forearm and the muscles that passes through the wrist. I'm already getting a contraction because those muscles have to be contracting. Remember, they're the similar muscles, the same muscles that creates a grip that causes finger flexion. All right, that causes the bending of the fingers. So as I begin to bend the fingers and curl them in, I'm already causing a contraction, and then I'm further creating a contraction by curling it up into wrist flexion. Okay? So I'm increasing the effort there of the muscles. So I have the weight in my hand, allow the weight to allow my fingers to open up a little bit, not too much for it to fall out, but just a little bit. And I'm curling my fingers in. As I curl my fingers in, I'm also curling the wrist up into full flexion. So I have a little bit of extension of the fingers as a starting position, and then the movement of action here, I'm curling the fingers, bending the fingers in. This is when I have a weighted object in my hand, and then end in flexion, all right? So as it relates to wrist extension now, I have the weighted object in my hand, so I turn my wrist over, and I have the weighted object. Okay, so I'm holding the weighted object so it doesn't fall out, so I'm gripping it properly, and I'm performing wrist extension. Okay? These are really good exercises to help to strengthen the muscles around the wrist area, strengthen the muscles of the fingers. It helps with overall range of motion, mobility, strengthen endurance, and overall functionality of the wrist, especially if it is that you're a person who has had a previous medical condition or injury of some sort to the wrist area or around the wrist area. If it is that that is the case, I will strongly suggest and advise that you seek medical advice and counsel from the physiotherapist first before performing this exercise. If while performing this exercise, you begin to feel an increase in pain sensation, then I would say you can either back off a little bit, maybe you'd have gone too far, you'd have done it too hard, intensity would have been too much, or you just stop from performing this exercise, let your physiotherapist know about it, and move on to something else. All right, so this is wrist extension, and turn your hand over, wrist flexion exercise. Remember to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm Roman Hunter. Have a wonderful day. Blessings.